Thank you. We have a guest today. The name is Professor Doreen Lee, an associate professor from Northeastern University in Boston, United States. And we will talk about anthropology and also urban life in Jakarta. But before, please, Professor, introduce your background, normally your study background, so that you become an associate professor in Northeastern, please.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Doreen Lee, and I was actually born in the region. I was born in Singapore, raised in Jakarta, in an English-speaking school, and then I went to New York for my undergraduate degree, so S1, where I majored in archaeology and also minored in modern Chinese history. So I had a lot of experiences doing intense seminars as an undergraduate, which fueled my love for research. I got to do archival research and original research, and I also did a summer program on an archaeological dig in New Mexico when I was a junior in college. And then when I applied to graduate school, I was accepted to a PhD program at Cornell in anthropology, where it was a dual MA/PhD program. So I got to work on both at the same time. And there I majored in sociocultural anthropology with a concentration in Southeast Asian studies and history. And my dissertation was about activism, student activism in Indonesia that led up to 1998 and the student movements. So my work was about the history of democracy movements in Indonesia.
Okay, so I'd like to follow up. You mentioned that previously your undergraduate is in archaeology.
Yes.
And modern Chinese history?
Yes.
And then your PhD, so it's quite, is it common in US, you graduate undergraduate degree in S1, then directly you will enter to PhD program?
It's not uncommon. A lot of people do that, or they might take a gap year of 1 and 2. So for people who already know that they want to go to graduate school while they're still doing their bachelor's degree, that's a kind of normal trajectory. I would say where mine is a little bit unusual is that I switched my disciplinary focus fairly drastically. But I was very interested in material culture, and that was why I was interested in archaeology. And I maintained that thread of interest in my PhD work later on. So a lot of my work actually looks at material culture.
I just want to clarify, you mentioned about the Cornell University. I know that Cornell University is part of the Ivy League. Yeah? In Indonesia, it's very popular, Harvard, MIT, but probably they do not know about PRON and other type of university. But I know the name is very highly regarded. And Cornell University is also known for Indonesian studies. Or Southeast Asian studies?
Yes, you're absolutely right. So Cornell is one of the few schools in the US which has consistently focused on Southeast Asia. It has a Southeast Asian Studies Center that is supported by state funding. And so it actually has a lot of resources to do language training for people who want to study Tagalog, who want to study Indonesian, who want to study Burmese, who want to study Thai. So Cornell is one of the few places in the US where you can do that. And Cornell is, I think, still famous amongst researchers of Indonesia and amongst Indonesian researchers themselves. And they have this very strong association with Cornell because there have been scholars studying Indonesia since really the 1940s.
1940, correct. I read some paper, what they call Cornell paper, right?
Yes.
That's very... Basically, Cornell paper telling about what happened in G30 SPKI and the before, I think. The name is Penn Anderson. Then the previous is also, I know some...
And Ruth McVeigh.
McVeigh, McCahin.
That George
Cahan,
Cahan was not one of the writers of the Cornell paper. He was the founder of the Southeast Asian Studies kind of program at Cornell. So he was the founding father. And the famous Cornell paper that you're talking about was a white paper that produced an analysis of what happened during the coup not long after G30S. And so that paper sort of put together a political analysis of what the authors thought might have happened and the levels of military involvement and so on and so forth. And for that paper, one of my teachers, I took a class with Professor Ben Anderson. He's very famous for his book, Imagined Communities. He trained so many people. I think we're all indebted to him and his vision, and how he, saw the importance of culture in the study of politics. So for that paper, Ben Anderson could not enter Indonesia for, I think, 30 years. So he was banned from the country. But I want to sort of say something about the Cornell tradition, which is, it's very common for scholars trained in Cornell to think a lot about the importance of culture, to have a kind of cultural explanation for things.
Yes, I met late Ben Anderson in 1994 in Ohio State University, long time ago. But I heard about the Cornell paper before that meeting. So it's very popular. So the Cornell tradition, it's agree. Now, let's talk about your research. You're talking about student activism in 1998.
Yes.
That actually make what they call the Reformasi. So can you share what is the essence or summary of your PhD research?
Yeah, it was a very fun but also intense research project to be involved in. I did the research for that book in 2003 to 2005. So some years after Reformasi, but where the kind of political changes and political culture associated with Reformasi was still very strong. So I did my research at a time when a lot of young people really believed in democracy and human rights and civil society. And I think the essence of the research was to showcase how in modern Indonesian history, for most of the 20th century, there has been a kind of tradition of youth involvement through this concept of pemuda, right? So how important the pemuda are in nationalist historiography. So my work kind of looks at that tradition to partly explain why there were so many young people who felt very invested in politics, whether it's street politics or other forms of politics during the Reformasi movement.
So you studied in 2003, 2007, but you studied 1998?
Yes.
But the setting is 2003 and 2007, and you absorbed that the feeling of Pemuda at that time, they believe in the democracy. They get the sense of positivism about what will happen to the country in the future in the time of 2003, 2007?
So 2003 to 2005 was the period of research, and then I came back every year after that for a number of years. And I would say that, yes, a lot of people were feeling kind of optimistic because they felt like they were involved in Reformasi. So they felt like they had actually done something very material towards changing the future of the country. So that was the mood then.
Okay, good. Because I read the book what called Democracy in America, and Alexis de Tocqueville. And he is an outsider, studied in United States. And he sensed the positivism of democracy in America, young democracy of America at that time. But he as a foreigner can explain, I think it's better than others of the American at the time, explaining how the positive feeling democracy in Indonesia. So in your case, you will be kind of Alexis de Tocqueville for Indonesia. But now probably you are better because you're still doing research on Indonesia after 2003 and 2005. where Alexis de Tocqueville only doing 1 year and never continue the research. That's my appreciation.
Thank
and,
you.
And thank you because you're doing a lot of things for my country. I mean, explaining what happened from your perspective. Now, I want to know what is your current job and your current research?
So my current job is as an associate professor of anthropology, and I've worn different hats. So I've been involved in kind of directing undergraduate studies for my department. I've also been the director of our Global Asian Studies program. So I've been involved in shaping curriculum for students. I've held a lot of events. I've planned a lot of lecture series and conferences. So my contributions have been to kind of intellectual life on campus and making sure that our students are exposed to a lot of new research on what is happening in Asia that they otherwise would not see in other parts of the campus. So I think it's important for students on my campus in Boston to get a kind of view into both contemporary and historical events and phenomena in Asia. So in my classes, I teach a lot on Southeast Asia, for example. And I teach undergraduates, I teach master students, I teach PhD students, and for someone of my level, we're also involved in a lot of administration.
Because you all have, the head of the program, Global Program Agency, is it?
So I was the director of the Global Asian Studies program, and that's a program I continue to be involved in a lot. We work very closely as a team of colleagues to help expand the program.
The reason I know in Indonesia, they call Tridharma Perguruan Tinggi. Basically, every lecturer they have, other than teaching, they has also do research that they call pengabdian mas, community development or community contribution. That's the Indonesian only. The percentage showing different type of perguruan tinggi negeri top and or perguruan tinggi swasta. And please tell me about what Northeastern University, or what is the intake of the student. What is their major that attract? Because I know Northeastern is very close to Harvard and MIT in Boston, so it's really good city to study.
Yeah, so Boston is a school of colleges and universities, a little bit like Jogja, right? And Northeastern is a private university that's growing. It has a global university network, so it has a lot of satellite campuses all over the US, partly in Canada and in London. And so it has a relatively large student body. It's similar to Boston University. It has, I should think, at least 20,000 undergraduates. A lot of undergraduates come to university for STEM, so science and technology. There's a kind of very famous school of computer science where they have a new focus on artificial intelligence, so AI. The business school is quite well known. And so for me, I'm in the humanities and social sciences. We teach a lot of students who have combined majors. So they might major in something in the social sciences plus something outside in a different college. So for example, they might be on a pre-medical track, or they might be on a business track, but they want to also major in something that's a little bit more humanities.
Is it what they call the liberal arts, the double degree or the double major?
So there is a kind of strong liberal arts focus for my college, and we would be the seat of the liberal arts for the whole university. And so the students kind of have a lot of choice in what they can major in, because they're not trapped in just engineering or just business or just computer science. A lot of them kind of combine across the faculties.
So it's really cross cross faculty, cross curriculum, cross
Yes.
discipline.
Yes.
You mentioned previously that in Cornell University, your PhD or where you studied, you have very strong emphasis on the ASEAN studies, Indonesian studies, and what you mimicking that in Northeastern University when you teach a lot of Southeast Asian studies or Indonesian studies, and how you will see it will relate with your future contribution to the body of knowledge of anthropology and Indonesian studies or Southeast Asian studies?
Oh, that's a great question. I think what I'm doing now is not exactly the same as the program I graduated from, because Cornell and a few other universities have area studies programs, whereas at Northeastern we don't have specific area studies programs. So a lot of the work we do is topical, and so a lot of students come to my classes, for example, if they're interested in the topic rather than the region. So I try to sneak in as much area studies knowledge as I can so that the curriculum is more diverse. So they're not just reading about US or Europe, they're also reading about China and Japan and South Korea and Indonesia and Malaysia and so on and so forth. So I think what I contribute is a kind of intersection where I can remind a lot of our anthropology students that a lot of original anthropology theory actually derives from the region. So there are famous anthropologists like Clifford Geertz.
Clifford Geertz, wow, the Priyayi and Abangan.
Abangan and Santri, and yes. So there might be figures like that who played a very important part, not just for Indonesia, but also all the way to New Guinea, for instance, and that really contributed a lot to the foundations of anthropology. So in reading all of that older stuff, I try to kind of also then combine it with newer research on the region. So there's some continuity there.
Wow, thank you. So you mentioned, actually, I thought you will become the next Alexis de Tocqueville, but you mentioned the name of Clifford Geertz because for Indonesian it's really famous because he's type of the taxonomy. Wow, that's in.
I should also mention Hildred Geertz, right? Because a lot of the early anthropologists were husband and wife pairs, right? So we should remember that whenever they went and did research in the field, they went as a couple, and so you had a Margaret Mead and Gregory Peterson in Bali, right?
Wow.
And so, this is a kind of strong legacy.
The anthropology and the Indonesian studies. So it's good combination. Thank you. So, what will be your advice to young generation who want to become Clifford Geertz or Margaret Mead or Alexis de Tocqueville or Professor Doreen Lee?
Well, there are a lot of wonderful anthropologists who are Indonesian who I think embody the same spirit and have a great deal of curiosity and also a great deal of knowledge that they've obtained usually overseas, right? Because they have to usually go to Australia or Europe or the US to kind of really intensely study Indonesia. So that's one contradiction that we need to think about. I guess my advice would be read as widely as you can. So don't just stick to the topic, but see what other people have had to say kind of around the topic. So don't just read anthropology, read history, read sociology, read geography, read political science. Have a kind of wide sense of what are the categories people are talking about when they are interested in a particular topic or phenomena. Network, be brave, reach out to people, write an email and say, hi, my name is, I'm interested in this, and see if you can build a relationship with the people you admire, right? Whose work you read, whose theories you're thinking about, because in the end, they're people too. And I think a lot of us scholars want to support younger scholars and we want to see them flourish and develop. And so that's probably the gist of it. One is read everything,
Read
and
everything.
two is be brave.
Wow, read everything and be brave. More assertive and patient to get your passion for young generation, so that you can become like Professor Doreen Lee and other anthropology and Indonesian studies. And Professor Doreen Lee, thank you very much for giving your time to come to this podcast. But I know you will be here in the next couple months, and we need to discuss more on your current research or your future research about Jakarta. You should promise us that.
Okay, I will. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Doreen Lee. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Uni.
Thank you.